everyone. Welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. A very happy new year to you all. 2023 promises to be as memorable, we hope, as 2022. And we very much start as we mean to go on. The tipping Supremos join me, and it's Tom Collins who got the new year off to a flyer with some spot-on selections from last week's podcast. And I have to say, I have to eat my words. I couldn't see Hermes Allen in the Challow hurdle, especially in that ground, which looked bottomless by the time they got to the Challow. But he was in another parish to the rest, and at a price of 11-8, that looked extremely generous considering the performance. TC, well done. How impressed were you?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was really impressed. I thought it was a good performance. Turning in, well, let's go back to the start of the race. He didn't get to lead. Now, we all thought he was going to be taken on up front. Harry Cobden wanted to go forward and dominate the race like he did in his two previous starts under rules, but he didn't get the lead. He instead took a lead in second. It was ideal. The race position was ideal. He was never in a bad position. But when he took it up turning in, Harry Skelton's charge, Vicky Vale, faded out the back of the TV. He just went clear in fourth gear, didn't he? He never really went into fifth or sixth gear. I think we haven't seen the best of Hermes Allen, and he posted an RPR of 152 in that race. Now, to win a Ballymore, you need to post around 156, 158. So he's got £4 to £6 to find to be an average winner of the Ballymore. I think that's perfectly doable, but at the same time, different track, different conditions, different opposition. He's not at the top of my list, but he's definitely a Ballymore player going forward.
Yeah, certainly. And look, as we know, Paul Nicholls has been a big supporter of this race, and it's turned out well for him. He obviously had Braveman's Game a couple of years ago at Stage Star last year. Didn't turn into Cheltenham horses themselves, but did, at least we know Braveman's Game has turned into a serious chaser. So I think that horse, this is always a kind of a horse that's going to go on. They're not just going to be good novices. So definitely Hermes Allen is right at the top of the pecking order in terms of novices over here in the UK. So a pleasing performance. But you wear it well, Ross, who was your tip, 25-1. Ran a cracker to finish second, I thought, and she stayed on strongly. Trainer Jamie Snowden suggested that perhaps that Albert Bartlett might be next for her. Don't think you'll be getting 25-1 for whatever race she might end up in the meantime. They might run her again, but she's a likable type, isn't she?
She is, and it'll be interesting to see what she does next, because I think the rest of them you can kind of forget. I mean, I think a couple. Thomas Moore was the other one I put up by Dylan Thomas. Perhaps he'd be better on better ground, but the rest of them didn't look like much. So she's the key to it, really. We'll wait to see her run, see what she can do, and that will give us a good idea as to just how good Hermes Allen is. Because the handicapper didn't seem overly impressed. 149, I think Timeform were 144. I thought he was impressive. And his jumping is slick, and that will stand you to good stead time and time again. If he jumps like that at the Cheltenham Festival, he'll cause a lot of good horses problems.
Yeah, and it was a day where there were quite a lot of shocks. Jet Powered really didn't deliver. Don't know if it was the ground. There were some big double-figure prices, but it's always good when you see a horse win like that, even if the conditions weren't exactly what he wanted. And the fact, as TC was saying, he didn't get that lead. So I think he did it despite it not being ideal for him. So yeah, only time will tell how good Hermes Allen, but at the moment he's a Grade 1 novice, and the Grade 1s for the novices is what we're going to look at next. And we're going to pick up with the Grade 1 action at Sandown this weekend. Sadly, no Lucia, who was looking to give Nikki Henderson back-to-back victories. Obviously, we saw last year Constitution Hill absolutely bolt up and prove himself to be a real force of nature. And likely we will see an animal of that quality. But we have, at the top of the market, quite evenly matched types. Authorized Speed, 7-4 joint favourite with Tamarus. Arctic Brazil over from Ireland for Henry de Bromhead. Rachel Blackmore on board as 7-2. And then a bit of a gap for the rest. Nameen Lion, 14-1. Colonel Harry, 20s, along with Scarface. You Can Tango, 25-1, as is Lastra Boy. Blow Your Wad, 33s. And Joe the Dancer, 50-1. So yeah, sadly we don't have the filly Lucia, who added a little bit of spice into it. But TC, Authorized Speed, Tamarus, Arctic Brazil, as the betting suggests, all quite close up there. They set quite a nice standard, I thought. Obviously, we'll start with Authorized Speed, which is getting quite a lot of attention. Gary Moore, Jamie Moore has got good form figures behind him, the 2-1s. But I don't really feel like that explains everything, because we clearly have a horse with a lot of ability, but the jumping definitely needs to improve.
Yeah, 100%. When I was looking at this race, firstly, I looked at the trends, and as you've touched on, there's been some really good winners of this race in the last 10 years. Constitution Hill obviously being number one. We won't see anything like him, and we probably won't see anything like him for a number of years to come because he's just an exception, an anomaly, a Frankel of the jumps. But 6 of the last 8 jollies have won this race, and they include the likes of York Hill, Fiddler on the Roof, and Constitution Hill, as well as many others. Lammy Surge is in there as well. So you tend to have good horses running in the Tolworth, and I think we do have good horses this year. You've already touched on a couple of them. Arctic Brazil made a good debut under rules, beating Mercury, who I think is probably just a chaser in the making. I actually put Mercury down last year as a horse to follow going into this season, but I think I was probably a bit presumptuous that he would immediately make up into a top horse, whereas I think he probably needs time now after seeing him in that novice hurdle against Arctic Brazil. But the fact that Henry de Bromhead's bringing him over is interesting. Tamuris has got good form, but I think he's probably a stayer in the making. I think 2.5 miles at least is going to be his minimum trip in time, and this could be a little bit on the sharp side for him. I just think Authorized Speed just stands out like a sore thumb in this race. Now, I know it's boring, a favourite again after putting up Hermes Allen last week in the Cello, but at the same time, they have similar kind of factors as to why you want to be putting them up. Not only has Authorized Speed got course form, he's got the best form in the race. He was 5th in the Champion Bumper last year behind Facile Vega. Let's not forget, he was the first British horse home in that race, and it was on heavy testing ground. You could barely see the track. So the forecast rain this week in Esher, and also the already soft ground, is just going to play to his favour. Yes, his jumping is a question mark, but I think that's his only negative in this race because he hasn't beaten much this year, but what he's done is win very impressively on both occasions. First time up at Lingfield, he smashed Broadway Boy, who's won subsequently. Last time up, he beat a horse called Immortal, who we'd never seen before, for Nicky Henderson. We don't know how good that race was, but he couldn't have been more impressive, especially because he made a hash of the last hurdle. It was a horrific mistake, but he still managed to re-find his stride and pick up the hill, which I thought was very impressive. So he had loads left in the tank, and he won decisively anyway by 6 and a bit lengths. So I think he was really impressive. His downside is the jumping, but providing he can get from A to B, I think he's by far the horse to beat over this kind of trip.
Yeah, I think, look, there's plenty going for him, hence why the price he is what he is. But do you look at a couple of the others? Obviously, this is the strongest race that he's going to have faced. Between Arctic Brazil and Tamarus, obviously, as we said, quite evenly matched betting perspective. Who do you think out of those would be the nearest danger to him?
Well, I think it's probably Arctic Brazil, which is interesting given I know your both your selections for this race. Purely because I think Arctic Brazil is more of a 2-miler than the other two. I was impressed with him on his novice hurdling debut. At the same time, he needs to take a big step forward on RPRs and official ratings to suggest that he's anywhere near capable of putting up to Authorized Speed. But the reason why I think he's the biggest danger is because Tamuris, as I've already touched on, I think is 2.5 miler. I think Colonel Harry's only going to improve for distance as well. And there are others in here at the same time that I think are just going to be 3-milers in the future. So right at this stage, Authorized Speed is definitely the horse for this race, whereas others, this could be a stepping stone to bigger and better targets in the future.
Yeah, it is interesting. Authorized Speed obviously won over that 2-mile, 3 and a bit furlong distance on his penultimate start, then bought Bracken Trip because they clearly think that he does have the speed, which is in his name. And I imagine a lot of these horses would have had options over a bit further. Paul Nicholls wants to naturally keep his horses apart. He obviously sought with Hermes Allen, keep Tamarus apart from him, so keep him at this minimum trip at the moment. Okay, Authorized Speeds for Tom. Ross, as we've touched on, look, there's the 3 obvious ones at the top, which they come from the right yards for this kind of race, and Arctic Brazil coming over from Ireland is a great thing. I haven't seen many Irish horses in this field for quite some time. He's a strong traveller, and I know you like your breeding. Being by Blue Brazil, who we have talked about throughout the course of the last year or so since Constitution Hill came on the scene, but fascinatingly, he's out of that King's Theatre mare, which is akin to the Constitution Hill cross. And they've done really well, that cross. So the 5 runners I could find, 4 are winners, 3 are unbeaten under rules, including this guy, Arctic Brazil. But he doesn't have a huge amount of racecourse experience, does he? And I don't know, bringing him over, is it because Henry de Bromhead wants to avoid some of the options over in Ireland? That's get some of the stronger types. Does that make you kind of feel, because it made me feel that potentially he's not the better one in his yard?
Yeah, that's exactly how I've looked at it, because if he wants soft ground hurdles, Ireland is the place you want to be. You don't need to send them over here. I think he's looking at this as a slightly weaker option. I thought it was very notable after his win that he said he's a big raw baby, and he did look like a big raw baby. I think he's going to be a lovely horse in time. I thought Mercury folded very tamely. I didn't like his head carriage, so I don't put a whole lot of weight behind that form. And on that basis alone, I've taken him on. Again, when you consider Henry de Bromhead is just 10% in the last 2 weeks, they're not just quite firing yet. And travelling him across, that was enough to put me off. I completely get where TC's coming from. I really like Authorised Speed. I tipped him last year for a bumper. He's a horse I followed. He's going to love the ground. He's going to have to jump better. But I think Tamuris is a decent horse, and he went on the soft at Haydock. Whether that's going to translate to going on heavy ground at Sandown, I'm not sure. But I found it very difficult to pick between the two of them. Authorised Speed, we should just say that Godo, that finished 19 lengths third last time, was well beaten 30 lengths off a mark of 103 at Huntingdon over Christmas. Just tempered my enthusiasm a bit. So in a situation where I'm struggling between the two at the top of the market, my attitude is to see if I can find someone to finish third and maybe second, or maybe win if those at the head of the market perhaps underperform a little bit. So I've come down with two. The first is Lastra Boy from Evan Williams' yard, who finished in front of Tamuras in a Foss last bumper. I wouldn't normally put a huge amount of weight on that, except for the fact it's an Evan Williams trained bumper winner. He's 9% in his lifetime bumper winners, I think 5% in the last 2 years. When you compare that to Paul Nicholls, who's 24%, they went off 7-2, and Lastra Boy was 25-1. He clearly wasn't tuned up for that, and got the better of Tamuras, who you would imagine was fairly ready, because Paul Nicholls often has his ready for the bumpers. He then won a good novice hurdle on soft ground at Foss Lass, travelled really powerfully to be Inedit Star 4 lengths. It would have been much more than that, but he did make a fairly bad mistake at the last hurdle, sort of lost his legs and momentum and had to be picked up. I thought that was an impressive piece of form. I loved how he travelled and jumped through the race. I just thought 25-1 was just far too big, given that we just don't know how good he is, and he looks like he'll handle soft ground. And then if I like Lastra Boy, I have to like Colonel Harry. Now, I'll try and explain this, but it's a little bit like that old riddle of the fox, the chicken, and the bag of corn getting them across the river. So bear with me. Inedit Star, who Lastra Boy beat 4 lengths, finished third on his next start, back at Foss Lass, beaten 4 lengths by a horse called Uncle Bert. Now, Uncle Bert, in his previous run at Sandown, was beaten 7 lengths behind Colonel Harry. So there's the link. And Colonel Harry, I think Sandown form is really important. He's proven he'll go on. I mean, it was desperate ground at Sandown that day. Jumped out, made all, jumped really well, and just cleared away. Now, what the form is worth, time will tell. Very few out that race have run, but he did it very, very easily. Gavin Sheehan was very confident on him. I think he's a smart horse. His point-to-point form doesn't read all that badly. He was going to win his first point-to-point and fell. The horse that was 7 lengths behind him at the last is now rated something like 125. I think he's clearly got a bit of an engine. Jamie Snowden and Gavin Sheehan are absolutely flying. They're both around about the 25% mark over the last fortnight. He is again around about 20-25-1. So my tactic is to split my stakes between the two of them each way. Hope that maybe Tamuras or Authorised Speed underperform, or preferably both, and I think they'll be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, we have seen some shocks over the last few days, over the last week or so, and you've got to respect the fact that these horses, they're all coming into this with wins under their name, and it's just whether that they can improve for this grade in a better quality race. Sometimes it can bring out the best of them. Lastra Boy 25-1, and it's unusual to see Evan Williams with this kind of style of horse. Good luck to them to see if he can bid it in this grade. Colonel Harry, we have it at 20-1. I'm going to sort of close up the circle a little bit, because we've talked about fair few of these. I think absolutely fair enough. Authorised Speed and all the justifications that Tom's given. Tamuras is my selection. I feel like he might go off shorter than what he is at 7-4. Authorised Speed clearly has a lot going for him. He's got that Sandown form. He's got this nice profile. I think everyone is a big supporter of Gary Moore at Sandown, but I've been so impressed with Paul Nichols's novices this season. In general, they're so well schooled. They jump better than majority of their rivals. And this lad just did that at Chepstow and then again at Haydock. It was quite interesting to rewatch it back because he got caught a little bit flat-footed. He had to be shaken up by Harry Cobden, who does really get the best out of these kind of younger horses, really educates them in their racing. And then he came back on the bridle and he just suddenly came alive. And I think that raw ability is clearly there. Paul Nicholls said after that, that was Betfair Chase Day, that this is one of his better novices, and we know how good they are. And the form is all right as well. I think it was third place horse Snake Roll that went on, came out of this race and absolutely bolted up next time out. So those elements are adding up for me. So as much as I like Dartsip Brazil and the way that he sort of skipped clear on his final hurdle at Cork, and he just showed himself to be quite slick, and did have that sort of that speed that you want to see for this kind of race. I think he lacks the experience, and I do think that when you read that Henry de Bromhead was thinking about the Moscow Flight at Punchestown and then decided to bring him here instead, it just, as we've mentioned, makes me think that maybe he wants to avoid certain types over in Ireland. So that is the Grade 1 Tolworth Hurdle. Keep an eye on the rain. That might bring out a need for stamina. It's soft ground at the moment at Sandown, and likely to get worse. We saw it in an absolute mud bath last year, and it's always like that at this time of the year. Okay, so that's the look at those. Right, we've got plenty of other racing over the course of this weekend. Our naps last week were just brilliant to close out the year. TC's nap, Mayfair Gold, delivered at 6-4, and his next best, Kate Dory, how he was beaten. I can see TC shaking his head. He's still getting night terrors about that. We will leave that to one side. But your New Year's Day handicap selections were both placed. Stolen Silver was second at 11-1. Il Rodotto, I know you love that horse. Fourth, not good enough, but still was a place selection at 8-1. So we'll start with you first for your nap and your next best, please.
Oh, before we go into that, I'm still gutted about Kate Dory. I know I shouldn't be greedy. Had a couple winners last week. It was good, but God, I couldn't sleep that night. How did that horse get beat? It was unbelievable. Anyway, right. Nap. We're going to Kempton for the nap and the next best, actually, because I actually heading to Kempton on Saturday evening. So I thought I'll stick there. The nap is going to be Nails Murphy in the 7 o'clock at Kempton. It's a 10K Class 4 novice event. We don't know much about many of the runners. There are a couple of first-time starters in there, one for Archie Watson and one for Andrew Balding. Both look reasonably well-bred and also well-connected. So, hopefully they don't spoil the party. But of the horses that have run, I think plenty of punters are going to latch onto a horse called Chorlton Lane, who was ridden by Jamie Spencer first time up at Newcastle, won on debut, didn't come off the bridle, a typical Jamie Spencer ride. But he beat horses rated 67 and 61. And I think people are going to look at that performance, the visual aspect of that performance, and think he should be winning again. And that could hold the price for Nails Murphy, who made a fantastic start to life at Chelmsford in a novice event, sent off at 16-1 for Richard Hughes, who's not known for first-time out winners, in a race full of horses that on paper looked like they were going to be potentially useful. The favourite in that race was Ottoman Empire, trained by Sir Mark Prescott, who won first time up at a huge price and did it very impressively. I thought he was going to win again, but no, Nails Murphy loomed large, travelled powerfully around the outside and really picked up on the long straight at Chelmsford and drew clear of Ottoman Prince. It was a really impressive performance. And I think with that experience under his belt, 60 days layoff just to freshen him up, physically and mentally mature from that first time effort, I think Nails Murphy is a good thing in the 7 o'clock at Kempton. We'll move on to the next best, which is Sun King in 8 o'clock at Kempton, trained by George Bowie. George Bowie's just done brilliantly well in his career so far. Still a young and up-and-coming trainer, but he's improving all the time and posting really good statistics. And it's interesting that he's getting these big ownerships in the door and getting these new horses. And the fact that he's got this opulent thoroughbred trainee called Sun King in his yard now suggests that he's going to get plenty more shrewd operations coming in. Opulent thoroughbreds, you might know them for their horses with Stuart Williams. Generally, they're really well backed. So expect there to be some money for Sun King. And if there isn't, then maybe that's a negative going into the race. However, this horse has only made 7 starts, all for Aidan O'Brien. He was purchased for 120k last July at the Horse in Training sale. With Aidan O'Brien, he was progressing into a nice individual. It looked like he was really green and fresh early in his career, but then he was stepped up in trip, Aidan put him in some deep waters, but he actually ran really respectively, including in the Golden Gates handicap at Royal Ascot, where he finished third to miss the cut. Interestingly trained by George Bowie. George Bowie may have had an eye on that horse, Sun King, back in the field, finishing really well down the outside, and think, you know what, this horse has a future off a mark of 90. The handicap has dropped him £1 down to 89. Now he is coming back off a long layoff, so you have to take fitness as trust. But at the same time, this horse is so well handicapped that even if he's 80% fit, I think he's going to run a great race. He's drawn well in gate 4. Maybe the series final of this event will be the target for the winter, but even first time up, I think Sun King is going to be really hard to beat.
Yeah, gelded since joining George Bowie, and down and trip again as well. Yeah, intriguing. Good racing at Kempton, isn't there, on Saturday night? You'll be enjoying it, I am sure. And a couple of selections you hope to add after what goes on at Sandown. So that is TC's Napa Next Best. We hope he's going to build on a great start to the new year. Ross, what have you found for us?
Well, I found plenty. It's one of those rare weekends where there was a good few I liked, but the two I've come down on, the Nap, 3 o'clock, the Veterans Chase. I love these races, perhaps not always a betting medium, but I think it's just great to see these old horses out. And largely this is made up of horses whose best chance of winning a race has been in veterans handicaps. I don't think that applies to Snow Leopardess. She's been dropped £4 for 3 poor runs. 2 of those at Aintree over the big fence in the last year's Grand National, this year's Beecher Chase, on good to soft ground. It's just no good to her. She just cannot act on that ground. And then in between those, she had that run at Warwick where she slipped going into the first, made an absolute Horlicks of it. Aidan Coleman lost his iron and decided that that was enough and pulled her up. So she's yet to show that she's lost her form. Prior to that, she'd won 3 times from 3 on soft ground, including absolutely sluicing up in a mare's listed chase at Exeter. Down now to this mark, I think she's still got plenty of mileage left in her. I think this is tailor-made for her. She'll go from the front, and I think she'll jump them silly, and I'd be disappointed if she didn't win this. And then the next best is in the 150 at Sandown, again on a sort of ground angle. Frero Bamboo from the Venetia Williams yard. He's just been outpaced the last twice at Ascot. He travels nicely, and as they turn in and quicken it up on good ground, and we know that Ascot is probably riding a bit quicker than good at times. I think he's just got outpaced. I had him sort of penciled in for a step up in trip. They've come back here on soft ground, down now just £6 above his last winning mark, which came on heavy ground at Lingfield, which is £1 below his third place in the Grand Annual, also on heavy ground at Cheltenham. I think ground is the key to him. Mark of 140 on soft ground. Charlie Deutsch, who's one of my favourites doing the steering, I think he's got conditions to suit and is well weighted.
Okay, nice selections, not bad prices it sounds. Snow Leopardess 6-1, Frero Bamboo 8-1 for you there, Ross. And I thought it was a good competitive day's racing. Good field sizes. Again, I think we should be lobbying for a 2-week break in the end of November or whenever it was, beginning of December every year, because it's just created better racing and we can all have a little holiday. But it's definitely a good weekend at Sandown, at Wincanton, where I'll be presenting, and Kempton as well. And looking forward to the action as well. I'm going to take on Ross with my Nap selection. Grey Diamond for Sam Thomas. Now, Sam Thomas won't be TC's best friend at the moment. He keeps getting his horses just beaten. He's got so many 2s to his name, but he's got some seriously likeable horses, and Grey Diamond really is one of them. I thought he ran a good race on seasonal reappearance at Cheltenham when he was third to Amarillo Sky, and just behind Fugitive. And we know what he's gone on and done. Absolutely bolted up next time out, and looks like a real force to be reckoned with for the rest of the season. Grey Diamond is returning to Sandown, a track he loves. He won there as a novice, and he just jumps the track very well. And I like his profile for this race coming back to Sandown. He is on quite a high mark now of 133, but he's performed well at this level. It's a really decent race, but I hope that Grey Diamond can get his head in front for Sam Thomas, his horses are running well without winning, which is always frustrating for a yard that we've all been following and we all respect and rate highly. So that's my Nap, and my next best, which could have been a Nap as well, because I think it's going to be a short price, is at Kempton in the 5:30 Star Mood. I saw him run first time out at this track for when it was Charlie and Mark Johnson back in December, and was second at a big price, 22-1 to Hadrianus, one of his stable companions. He had Fox Vision just behind him, who he reopposes this time. And I think he really caught my eye as a physical. He's by See the Stars. He's just had a real lovely presence to him. He's one of these middle distance types that Charlie Johnson now has got to look forward to go to war with the rest of the season. And I think he should win this race, stepping up in trip to 1 mile 4 furlongs. So that's for you, TC, to take for your beginning up your day at your evening at Kempton. So we hope that that's a good night there with Star Mood. So yeah, good selections. Let's hope we can continue on a similar vein that we started in. We are going to have the opportunity now to have the stat attack from TC. We've missed this. Too much racing, but I feel like there's something brewing.
It's the first one of the year, and it's not going to be an interesting one from a punting perspective, but I think it's a horse that we need to mention on the podcast. Now, this week's stat revolves around Bo Zenith, who runs in the 12:05 at Sandown, a juvenile hurdle on Saturday. A horse that I'm really excited to watch, because if you look back at that French form where he won first time up, now I'm no French connoisseur. Ross is definitely more knowledgeable in that department than myself, but the runner-up, Blood Destiny, subsequently moved to Willie Mullins and bolted up on Irish debut. The third has won a listed race in France. The fifth has won since. The seventh has won since. The form looks great. He did it really impressively to the eye as well, really quick and clear in the closing stages. He could be the horse to challenge Lossiemouth in the Triumph Hurdle betting, but he's going to be a very short price. However, this is Stat Attack, so it's not just talking about a horse I'm excited to see. The Stat Attack revolves around his trainer, Gary Moore, and this race, the 12:05 at Sandown. In the last 10 years, Gary Moore has targeted this race with his best juvenile hurdler. Not only has he won it 3 times, including for the last 2 years, but he's also had 2 runners-up and a 3rd place finish in that time frame. He always runs a good horse here. Yes, it's not the deepest of race year on year, but at the same time, never look past Gary Moore's runner. So hopefully, and he should, extend that record come Saturday, and we could see a Cheltenham Festival prospect on the line. But also to you guys at home, if you have a Stat Attack, then please feel free to fire it in the YouTube comments if you're watching on YouTube, because I love a stat.
You definitely do. We love that as well. Bo Zenith around about 20-1 already for the Triumph Hurdle. And we just love seeing Gary Moore having winners at Sandown. And I'm sure that you'll like to see this to begin his day with Authorised Speed coming a bit later, your selection for the Tolworth. Okay, we love that. TC Stat Attack is back for 2023. And yeah, definitely get in touch if there's anything that you want to hear more about, especially over looking ahead for the rest of the season. We are here at your beck and call. So that's it for our first episode of 2023. A reminder that new SBK customers can get £30 in free bets by betting £10. T's and C's always apply. We're really enjoying seeing our numbers improving and lots of people enjoying the podcast. Make sure that you subscribe so you can be reminded every week when a new podcast is out. You can listen to us on whatever podcast channel you use, but you can also watch our pretty faces on the YouTube channel. There's plenty of other content there, as well as SBK ambassador content and exclusive stable tours to enjoy. So that's it. I hope we've given you a couple of winners. Enjoy the racing. Thanks to Ross and thanks to Tom, and we'll see you next week.